Welcome to Voracious Podcast. Got Hershey Schaffner yet again, faithful co-host.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. What do you call that? That's not canned laughter. That's canned applause.
Yeah.
Applause. Yeah.
It's a sign.
Well, today we're going to talk about faith. I'm kind of digging, and I have been for a long time, contemplating. I dig around and my brain comes up with things. But faith, what is faith? Faith versus belief. Are they synonymous? Are they different things? Belief versus knowledge. Because I think to start, people will die and fight for what they believe in.
Mm-hmm.
Most of what people, I think, unconsciously do in life is that they have a belief structure and a belief system that they live in and they walk in, but they think they know things and they really don't know things. You just believe things and you think that's knowledge. But most of what people think they know is really just belief and in whatever. I'm trying to come up with a good point. It's like, well,
So you mean like if something's repeated over and over, it just becomes something like people say cleanliness is next to godliness.
sure, and they think that's gospel
in the Bible,
scripture, yeah.
Right.
And it's not.
Right.
Yeah, people believe that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great example, a simple one. People just believe that that's in the Bible. Isn't that in the Bible? Cleanliness is next to godliness. Like, no.
No, that was what your mom told you, so you take a shower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or clean your room or whatever.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, stuff like that. So that's people believe that stuff. And I just noticed my clock's not running,
Squirrel.
but it should be. That's concerning now. Now I have a concern. Dang it.
I believe you have a concern.
I believe.
There you go.
But then faith, I feel like is a different level. It's something else. And I don't really know exactly what it is. But the Bible does say it's how does it say it? It's the substance of things hoped for.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
I know. Well, that's kind of funny.
And the evidence of things
Not
unseen.
seen. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, how do you have an evidence of something that's not seen?
No, that's good. I think it's funny because that's what you hear preachers say stuff all the time. And they're like, hey, this is what, and you're like, huh? What?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get it. Well, that's why I got this. I like this. The Amplified, it's Hebrews 11. It says, now faith is the assurance, and it breaks it out, the title deed or confirmation of things hoped for that are divinely guaranteed, and the evidence of things not seen, the conviction of their reality. Faith comprehends as fact what cannot be experienced by the physical senses. Don't know if that answers your question at all,
Well,
but I feel like it brings an enlightenment to it a little bit more. Yeah.
But even still, then it doesn't. I think it is interchangeable in some circumstances with just the word belief.
Oh yeah, yeah, I believe that.
Our faith or our belief system is what we're saying, But then if you're really talking about mountain moving faith, what Jesus alludes to is he's like, if you could just have enough faith, so much as a grain of mustard seed, and he equates it to something actually physical.
Mm-hmm.
But if there was physical and it was just that small, it would be so powerful that you could tell a mountain to be removed.
Yeah.
And that's one heck of an analogy.
Yeah. But I also think that analogy is like, when you look at it, I know the mustard seed's small. So a lot of, again, preachers, and I probably said it too, you just need a little bit of faith.
Yeah.
Right. But he didn't just pick a small item. Like when you start to look at like the mustard tree or bush
it's huge.
But how it grows too. And I remember years ago, somebody talking about it, and I looked it up, and that seed will try to come up through the ground. And if it hits obstacles, it doesn't give up. It like actually goes deeper again. And then kind of, so the root system is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And I think again, sometimes we just kind of get surfacey
Yeah.
There's a reason for everything in the Word.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know I pointed to my phone. There's not a reason for everything in my phone, but
in the Bible.
Yeah, it's the Bible. And reason for the Bible app. But yeah, I think that like, why did he? Because he could have just said like a pebble, right? He could have said your faith. Like he could have picked up a small pebble, but he used the mustard seed because I think it meant more about faith is like tenacious.
Mm.
In fact, like the Greek word for faith is the word pistis, which, you know, and I'm not a Greek scholar, but I have a Strong's concordance, right? You know, you look it up, but it means a firm persuasion.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like, I am firmly persuaded that this is going to happen. And that's what a mustard seed does. It's like, I'm going to break through. And so the root system becomes stronger. And so what you see on top is the byproduct of that tenaciousness that's underground.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that for me personally, that's what faith, it's like this system of, I have this firm persuasion, like my faith in God, you know, and even like we were talking about people saying, well, you know, you're not even questioning the validity of Scripture.
Yeah.
Because I have faith in what the Word of God is. I have this firm persuasion that this is truth. I've encountered this truth, and there is really nothing that can be said or done that will negate that truth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, because in Hebrews 11, it's an interesting, you know, it's an interesting chapter of faith and different people of faith and all that. But he goes on and he says, without faith, it's impossible to please God, because you have to first believe that he is.
Mm-hmm. And there's belief.
Yeah. You have to believe that he is. And then you have to, you know, continue in that persuasion of this is who he is. This is the confidence that I have that he is God and the creator of all things.
So how does that translate over to physical manifestations, like healing, like anything like that? Like, I was believing for this and it happened or whatever, or I prayed for this in faith and it happened or it didn't happen. Or what does faith have to do, in your opinion, with that aspect of it? You know, because I think that's where the rubber really meets the road for a lot of people, because it's like something real.
Yeah.
If you've ever experienced a healing at all, something really happened.
Mm-hmm.
And like I've said before on this podcast, I explained about my wife's foot being healed.
Yeah, you saw it happen.
And that was incredible. And I try to find out, well, where was my faith? Because faith, in my understanding, is what prompts that.
Yeah.
Like I have faith strong enough to where when I didn't even pray for healing, I just, you know, was praying to the Lord, thank you for loving us so much for healing. And then it happened, and I'm like, man, I'm trying to find this elusive thread that seems to be faith that brings things into reality. Because I have other stories that have really hindered my faith in the past. I've prayed for people, friends of mine, and I had a good friend of mine that was in the hospital. He was found code blue, but machines were keeping him alive. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I prayed for him out of desperation to, you know, rise up, be alive, and it didn't happen.
Yeah. And
that I can pinpoint that was one of the major markers in my life that made me think this is all crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, honestly.
No, I get it. Well, I mean, I told you about my sister, you know, the story that I dealt with that too.
But then I have other examples like the foot, or the turning point for me in faith, still whatever I'm grabbing onto that is faith. I remember it was because my youngest son was very, very sick in the hospital. And I was honestly, I think he was in there for a solid week. And for 4 days of that, I was scared to death to even pray for him, because I had prayed. And, you know, so I've got this whole thing going on for 4 days. I'm stressed out, and I'm just like, I'm glad there's a lot of faith-filled people praying for him. I can't do it. I'm terrified.
Yeah.
And so finally I got to the point where the Lord was working on me for these 4 days. And I got to the point where I just decided to trust God and believe and started praying for him. And I went to the hospital and the doctor met me. My wife was asleep because she was staying up there. I was at home for most of the days with our other son. She was sleeping at the hospital. The doctor met me outside the room and basically told me that, like, in most cases with stuff like this, we've seen turnarounds and you haven't turned around yet. So,
it's not looking good.
Yeah, this is not looking good. Yeah. And just letting you know, kind of thing. And I'm like, dang. But I went in there with a belief more than a belief, which I would say faith, with a tenacity. Like, I don't really give a rip what he says. I'm going in here. I'm praying for my son. He's going to be out of here. He's going to be healed, and we're going home. And I remember praying for him. I didn't see any kind of thing, but something, I don't know if it was about the situation or just in me, but something totally was different. And I just had the most peace ever. And I was just like, okay, I know he's fine. And I was told my wife, I was like, he's fine.
Yeah.
He's fine. And we'll be getting out of here. And it was within, I think, another few hours went by, and they're like, yeah, he's turned way, he's getting better. He's getting out of the PICU. He's getting out, putting him to a regular room, and he's just really doing really well, really rapidly now. And I'm just like, okay, so that changed things for me and my perspective. Now, I've still had instances where I prayed for people or prayed for whatever, and it's like it doesn't happen and I don't see it. And I guess that's what prompts my whole conversation today, because I'm trying to figure out, what am I missing when it doesn't happen?
Yeah.
Is it not, do I not see things because I'm just walking in hope or belief? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
these are questions I think a lot of people have.
No, I think so. I think it's why, there's debate on things like, there's a whole group of Christians that would say, well, it's just sovereignty, right? It's just like,
oh yeah, well, God does what he wants because
he's just sovereign.
Because he does what he wants. Yeah.
Yeah. And he is sovereign, but I don't think it's in that way. I think, faith is a journey, because it's like anything. It's interesting because you hear a lot of preachers talk about faith, and like even at the beginning of Hebrews 11, it says now faith is, like, so it's an active thing. It is a verb. It is, it's something that you lock into. And I think you in some senses grow in it. And I think anybody who's honest about their walk with the Lord, there are moments where they probably struggle with faith, whether it's, their belief in their salvation or their belief in a situation like you have,
right,
or I have as well. And I think for me, like, I'm not going to make this as a blanket statement for everybody.
Yeah.
But even in my journey and in praying about and thinking about this conversation, like, more and more, I'm convinced that I need to have faith in him and his promises of who he is.
Right.
Versus like the attributes of the fruit of it.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So can I read this?
No.
Dang. I read the Bible once.
First we have to question the validity.
Yeah, right. So at the end of Hebrews 11, I was looking at this earlier, and it goes on and it talks about everybody and what they did. And it says, that time couldn't even tell the stories of like Gideon and Barak and Samson and all these different people. And it says this, it says, Samuel and the prophets are in there, who through faith subdued kingdoms, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong. They became valiant in battle. They turned to flight armies of aliens. Women received their dead raised to life again. So, it's like all these different things, right? That's faith.
Yeah.
And so we would say, oh, that's faith. But then it goes on and says this is what kind of is like that, dichotomy of faith, of just believing in him as your source. Because it goes on and he says, others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. Still others had trial of mockings and scourgings, yes, and of chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, were tempted, and were slain by the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains, in dens and caves of the earth. All these having obtained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise, God having provided something better for us, that they should not be made perfect apart from us. Talking about the church all coming together. But to me, it's like this whole thing is about faith.
Yeah.
And the people who died, didn't get healings, had just as much faith, according to the writer of Hebrews, as the ones who had their children brought back to them.
Right.
Like that, it maybe even doesn't answer as much as it raises another question.
Sure.
But to me, it's like, I want the truth of a faith that says, God, I trust you. I want like that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thing where it's like, our God will deliver us.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't, he's still God. Yeah. Like, I'm not moved by it. And I think that's kind of what has crept into the.
But do you think but if he doesn't, that wasn't not having faith?
I don't think it was. I think it was, we have faith in him.
Yeah.
That he's got our best interest at hand.
Right.
So if he delivers us, that's because that was in his best interest. And I know it almost feels like that sovereignty thing, but it is like, I trust him enough that he's going to lead me. You know, he talks about Abraham, that he was like, this child was promised by faith.
Yeah.
You know, and it says that Abraham's faith made him a friend of God. And then he said, I'm going to take Isaac up. And in Hebrews writes, he says, and this is the way he looked at it. If I do kill him, the Lord will raise him back up, because he was the promise.
Wow.
And God's not going to take away his promises from me.
Right.
So I think more and more on this journey, it's less about the stuff that happens, as much as it is, I have faith in my Father that he's good. He's going to see me through, even when I don't understand what's happening.
Yeah.
Like, that's the evidence of what I don't see.
Then maybe that's the biggest problem in faith, is that we are using the wrong measuring stick, or we're weighing it incorrectly. We're weighing it against what have you experienced, what have you seen, what is your experience versus what is actually the truth. Because you can experience I've experienced a lot of things that don't line up with what the word says. Right. And so you have to, what's the word I'm looking for? Reconcile that somehow, you know, and I think the easiest way to do it is, well, my faith was faltering, or I just don't believe, or whatever. Yeah.
And I mean, people have used that like, oh, well, you just didn't have enough faith. So so your sister died, you know, you didn't, or she didn't have enough, whatever the stupid theology that fits. And again, I think it's that side, it's the opposite side of the ones who say, well, God's sovereign, so no matter what, he's just going to do what he's going to do. So we don't, you know, it doesn't look bad on us. I do think that's a lot of it, with especially ministers.
Yeah.
Is like, they want to look good. They want to look, they want to have all the answers, and have, you know, the ones who believe in the moving of the Holy Spirit, they want to be like, I have a healing ministry. You know, I mean, I'm building a healing ministry, and so we got to have fruit. So if there isn't fruit, oh, well, it must be on you.
Yeah.
It's got to be your faith, because I just prayed for this guy and he got healed. And then the other side of it that are sort of cessationists are like, well, God picks and chooses who he's going to heal and who he doesn't. And then I'm like, well, what a jerk. You know, I mean, dang. So my dad wasn't as important as your son.
Then you go into that,
bro. Then we're going down I mean, and I think that's where, if we can come to this place of going like, man, my faith is in him, that he's a good father, that he's going to look out for me, that he's going to walk me through even in the hardest, darkest situation.
Yeah.
You know, that he's going to show up at the hospital with like this transforming moment that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. And it, like I said, it wasn't healing that I experienced. I experienced peace.
Yeah.
It just seems like we try to fit what God's going to do for us in our box all the time as well.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you're going to do it this way. And it's never that way that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like, ever.
Well, and that's again, in the Western church, it's what we've done. I mean, we have camps, right? So they call the Word of Faith group, they call them the faith camp. And,
yeah.
And there's some really good men of God in that group.
Absolutely.
And then there's some wackos. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side of the ones who are cessationists, there's some really good men of God. Mm-hmm. And then there's some wackos. I memean, it's like, I don't think any of us have it figured out, but it is coming to a place of finding that balance. If our faith is in Him, mm-hmm. like if our faith is in following Him, then we're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
We're going to walk it out to this level and this degree where it becomes less about the things, which I think is another knock that comes against like the faith camp a lot, is because it's a lot about stuff. And I don't think the Lord's blessed you because you have 2 Mercedes. Like, I mean, because I know I could sell one of those Mercedes and feed a whole bunch of kids in Africa. And I think that would be a whole lot better than you having 2 Mercedes. But, at the end of the day, that I don't think all that peripheral stuff is what faith is.
Right.
I think the story, even in Hebrews, it talks about they believed God, so they did this. They believed Him, so they stepped out. Abraham believed God, so he left the land of his father, and he camped out in tents. It wasn't really in abundance. I mean, but God provided, and then he came to a place of abundance.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's the key of faith. The substance of it is, I'm trusting what you say, Lord, in your word.
Yeah. And being okay in the tent when you're in a tent. And that's hard.
It is. It's super hard.
Yeah.
But there's testing in that faith. And I mean, going back to that, I mean, it's just that one chapter, man. It says, looking unto Jesus, who's the author and finisher of our faith. I mean, that's to me, at the end of the day, that's what I got to do. I've got to keep my eyes on Him.
Yeah. Well, where do you go from there?
Keep our eyes on Him.
Yeah,
for sure.
Definitely. And I just wanted to touch real quick on, like, it's been a popular subject in the past, I don't know, maybe year. I'll give it a year. I think I've seen a lot of people, quote, deconstructing their faith. And that's there again. I think they're using faith with belief. They're using it instead of belief structure.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, I guess, questioning. I don't know what they're just tearing apart the whole structure and belief system of what they grew up with, and then they're saying, well, this is why I'm not a Christian anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's part of what I wanted to address in this episode, is because, like, well, that's not deconstructing your faith. I think it's perfectly fine to weed out your garden.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's cool. Cause there's a lot of crap that, like,
crap in a garden's actually good.
Well,
it makes it grow, but
yeah. But I mean,
weeds.
There's a lot of weeds that were taught in, like, especially like the 90s when I grew up. I know it was just like a lot of silliness that was taught that people believe.
Oh yeah.
They still believe. And it's weird.
Yeah.
And it's okay to weed that stuff out, but it's like, don't confuse that with just starting to believe that there's no God.
Yeah.
And that you just need to walk away from all that, because what you really need to do is just get back into the Word and see what the Word of God is saying, really. And I've done that a long time now. And when you discover, it's kind of cool when you discover something that you've been believing your whole life that has just been taught to you rather than what you've actually read in the Word, and you get to take that thing out. Like, sometimes I get mad because I've believed something stupid for so long, but it's actually quite freeing, which is, I think, what people are looking for in the first place when they start quote, deconstructing. So I just wanted to be encouraging to people that might be going down that path. It's okay to weed out your garden, but just make sure you're backing it up with what the truth is. I would just strongly recommend that you back it up with truth, not a different belief structure that somebody else handed you. Because really what you're doing then is just trading one for another because it fits your lifestyle better or something. So
yeah, no, I think that, because, and then, Romans 10:27 says faith comes by hearing, hearing by the word. And I do, you're right. I mean, there are belief structures that are based on opinion.
Yeah.
Somebody else's thought, a revelation
Yeah.
that somebody got, and the 90s, but even now, dude, I mean, like with YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and I mean, there's so many thoughts and opinions and ideas that are anti the reality of Christ.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lie of the enemy that, like you were saying, people deconstruct their faith. I think it's okay to evaluate.
Yeah.
Like to evaluate, why do I believe what I believe? I think that's healthy.
Yeah, you should be doing that.
But when you start taking things apart, and you said, like, what is your reasoning for it?
Yeah.
And so, it's that thing of people have gone like, well, I don't go to church because they're all hypocrites. Well, I mean, then don't ever vote. Don't ever go to Walmart. We're surrounded by hypocrisy. And should the church be at a higher standard? Yes, 100%. I believe that. I'm not making excuses for it. Are they? No, but they should be. And we should, but then at the end of the day, I was listening to a guy, he was talking about, I have a friend that's an atheist and he's like, how do I get them to understand that there's good and there's bad? And the guy sitting on a panel, he says, steal his car. And I was like, oh, I guess that, that kind of makes you go, oh yeah. There is a definite good and bad.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with questioning. There's nothing wrong with asking the questions, but then going to the answers, you've got to go to the word.
Yeah.
And not an opinion and not a self-help book. And just like on that, I met a lady the other day and she was so amazing. She told me when we were talking, she's like, I'm on this journey with Jesus. And she said, it's new. It's like 2 months old. And she's like, I don't even know what to call it. And I said, well, that sounded great. I was like, that sounds better than a lot of Christianese, I'm walking with the Lord. And she's like, I'm just on this journey. And the reason she's on this journey, she was in a bookstore getting another self-help book, trying to figure out what was going on. And while she was in there, she opened a Bible. And she said it was the first time she really actually like read a Bible. Like she had it, but she like started reading it. And she said, I've been reading the Bible and I found Jesus in this moment. And I'm on this journey and I'm trying to learn and I'm growing in it. And that's the thing is it's okay to ask the questions, but then your source of the answer, obviously as a Christian, has got to go to the Word of God.
Yeah.
And that's where the truth comes.
Yeah.
And it begins to reveal, a solid belief system that is built on faith. And it's hard because it takes faith to believe that he is, because you can't touch him, you can't see him. I mean, there's historical data that proves that Jesus was on earth and all kinds of things.
Oh yeah. Eyewitness accounts, historical record. It's silly to me that people argue that he didn't exist based on the heavily weighted side of eyewitness accounts.
Yeah.
That say he did exist. It's like, so to me, that's like, you really just don't like you don't like Jesus at all. If
you just want to do what you want to do. And so, yeah, I mean, but with all of that, you come into a place of, if you look for him, if you seek him, you'll find him.
Yeah. That's like a guarantee.
It's a guarantee.
It's funny. I wish I could remember where exactly I was, but I was getting ready to read some Bible the other night. And for me, it's easier to hear the Lord in New Testament. I think that's kind of normal. I want you to reveal just something a little fresh to me in the Old Testament. And I opened up to, I just can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something along the lines of Moses was on the mountain, and the Lord told him to go down from the mountain because it's time to get to work, basically.
Yeah.
That was the gist of this paragraph. Yeah. And then I kind of felt the Lord. He's like, okay, there you go. And I'm like, what? And he said, when's the last time you ever heard of anybody spending so much time with me I had to tell him to go do work?
Dang.
Yeah. I was like, oh, all right. Well, cool. Thank you. Because I've never done that. Sorry.
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah. So all that to say, he will come through. He will meet you where you're at.
Yeah.
So, and that's cool. I have faith for that.
I do too. I have faith in him.
Yes.
That he will see me through my weak moments of my faith.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I have to say, like the dude with the son who was demon possessed. And Jesus said, do you believe? And he said, Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief.
There you go.
Because it's just real. And that's okay. Like, again, to anybody who's going through this stuff, like, be honest with him. Be real with him.
Because he already knows anyway.
He knows anyway. Hiding nothing from him. So, yeah. And in that moment, like, it's a crazy story if you look into it, because the guy comes down, he's ticked off at Jesus because his disciples can't help his son. And he starts out calling him, he's like, teacher. Mm-hmm. Your guys can't do anything. You're not a very good teacher, in other words. And then Jesus says, do you believe he can be healed? And he was like, I believe, but help my unbelief. And so Jesus heals him, and he's like, Rabbi. Like, his whole perception of who he's like, oh, dude, you're the real deal. Mm-hmm. Like, I see it. Even before he healed him. Yeah. Like, he was like, oh, this guy really cares. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, is like, Jesus really cares. Yeah. And that's why even in my darkest days, I can have faith, because I know he intimately cares about who I am and what I go through. Pretty deep.
All right. Well, like and subscribe if you made it this far. Please do so, so you don't miss any of the action.
It's just too good to let go, Tell your friends about it, all 3 of them. That's how many I have. Right. You probably have more. So
be back probably next week.
That's the plan.
Lord
willing, and the creek don't rise.
All right. Thanks, guys. Voracious out. Oh.